Everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where are you. Can you please tell me in the chat if you can hear me and see me well? Yes, perfect. That is fantastic. You can hear me and see me. Perfect. Thank you very much for your time today. So today in this webinar, the Geneva School of Diplomacy is really happy to present you our guest speaker. Our guest speaker of today is Dr. Professor Likhotal. He's a professor at the Geneva School of Diplomacy and International Relations, as well as he is a former president of the Green Cross International. Also, he was appointed as a deputy spokesman and advisor for the former president, Gorbachev, and as well as he's currently a member of the board of trustees of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, World Academic of Art and Science, and lastly, he's a member of the Club Rome. So we are really happy to have him today. He's an expert in the field of international affairs, and he will discuss with you the navigating of social security and leadership. This webinar will consist in 3 parts. The first one will be the Professor Likhotal giving you the lecture, and after that you will have a small Q&A session with him. And lastly, in case that you have any questions or any concerns regarding the Geneva School of Diplomacy, or any extra questions that you can ask me or the professors, we will have like 5 minutes to discuss that. So without any further delay, I will leave you with the Professor Likhotal. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, or rather, can we turn off my sound here because it comes from, okay, thank you. Or rather, good time of the day, because I'm sure that not everybody talks in the afternoon now or participates in this discussion. And thank you for joining. You know, when I was informed about this webinar, I was quite interested, but when yesterday I received the form that you are coming from more than 50 countries, I was simply, very impressed, because you are bringing your experience. You can enrich our school and the teaching process here, because the more people come from the world, the broader is our perception and our outlook. And of course, you will be also exposed to an absolutely new, versatile campus, and it will enrich your understanding of the world in which we live. And how can peace and security be ensured in this changing and unsettled world around us? The title of the webinar is Security and Leadership. You know, I've been thinking about that all the time since I've accepted to speak here. And it inevitably, to my mind, came a quote from Shakespeare, because Hecate in Shakespeare's Macbeth said, "Security is mortal's chiefest enemy." How come everybody is fighting for security? Everybody talks about security. But, I hope you realize that security is not equal to peace. Security is a perception. Security of one can mean an insecurity for another. And it has many flaws, and it cannot stop emotional and spiritual evils flowing from within this concept of security. At that moment, when all these devils are let loose, no one is safe. That's why all the wars are justified by security, always. As we worry over our quest for security today, few of us aware that what we experience has been repeated over time again and again. Security has always proven to be elusive, and our ancestors failed repeatedly in the quest for it. This is important. The absence of peace is not the result of some villains or ill-minded politicians, unfortunately. Otherwise, it would not have been that difficult to cope with all these issues. That's why I'm not going to talk about the need of new leadership and demands of international security. We will try to look deeper into the issue and into the issue of the war at war, the world at war. Because for me, today, this is much more fitting to what we see around. Organized violence has been the scourge of humankind, at least as far back as Neolithic era. According to historians, in the history of mankind, there have been more than 15,000 wars in written history, in which up to 3.5 billion people died. We can say that humanity has always fought through its entire history without interruptions. In the past 5,500 years, people have been able to live in peace only for negligible 300 years. What does it mean? That means that in every century, the world lived in peace only for 1 week. In 100 years, 1 week. However, the post-Cold War generation has grown in the belief that history has ended before them. Fukuyama predicted, I am sure that many of you have read the book of Fukuyama, The End of History. And we somehow got used that revolutions, world wars, all this was before. We live in an era of comfort, in the era of stability, and everything seems calculable, predictive, almost predetermined. Everything is the same. Borders, lifestyles, in many parts of the world, growing standards of living. Not everywhere, of course, I do understand, and we all know that I'm talking not about all the world. I'll touch this issue. But you know, however, the world moved swiftly from MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, to SDGs, Sustainability Development Goals, from G7 to yet another G20 session. We have developed a whole set of complicated and elaborate political newspeak. And if actually we have created that because that screens us from the real world problems. We're talking about unprivileged people. We don't want to talk about the people who live for $2 a day. We call them unprivileged people. It's easier to absorb and to swallow. We talk about overseas contingencies operations. That's when a major state sends a regiment of troops well prepared, well armed to some area where there is nobody to provide any opposition to that. We talk about targeting killings, but somehow, occasionally, this targeting killing confuse the target, and we find among the casualties whole ceremony of wedding in a village. We talk about nature-based solutions because we don't want to do anything with the sustainability issues. And the last cherry on the cake, instead of the poor countries, we started using potential filled countries. Of course, it's easier, potential filled, forgetting that they are filled with sufferings, these countries. We have done everything to generalize the problems, thus decoupling ourselves from genuine human suffering. As if nicer looking stickers can change the real world situation. And the future, it seemed, belonged to unbridled globalization, and that proved to be an illusion today. Ukraine, Israel, Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, we can continue this list. The wars have started popping up as the bubbles in the rain. But although the wars are not inevitable, and I want you to remember that, that's very important point for you to study in the future. The wars are not inevitable, but they don't happen without reason. Therefore, no truly major war has ever occurred solely for subjective reasons, be it the power hunger, stupidity, greed, resentment of rulers, or whole nations that were entrusted to them, although each war has had plenty of such reasons. A war arising solely from subjective grounds would have been quickly nullified by objective, that is, leveling factors independent of human will. But if history has been stubbornly pursuing its line for years and decades, involving more and more human and material resources in the wars, it means only that this war had and still has objective reasons in addition to subjective ones. I don't know about you, but I'm already, getting kind of overwhelmed with having around 2 dozens of different existential crises happening at the same time. Troop deaths and injuries in Ukraine war are near 500,000, 10 million refugees. Syrian civil war, 12 years, 600,000 fatalities only. And on top of that, Yemen, Libya, Sudan, Myanmar, etc. Now Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Already very roughly, it's over 5,000 victims on both sides in less than a fortnight. World migration, 110 million people around the world have been displaced by war, persecution, and human rights abuses last year. Famine, inflation, market meltdown, monkeypox, etc., etc. We can continue endlessly about that. Climate, you can just look out of your window to see that it is for real. But if we will be just lamenting, we will lose the battle. And that moves me to another point. What's the problem? Where is the problem? And I want to give you a quote from a very old writing of Henry Kissinger. He wrote it more than 50 years ago. The essence of a revolution is that it appears to contemporaries as a series of more or less unrelated upheavals. The temptation is great to treat each issue as an immediate and isolated problem, which once surmounted will permit the fundamental stability of the international order to reassert itself. But the crises which form the headlines of the day are symptoms of deep-seated structural problems. More than 50 years have passed since he said that, and we continue treating the wars in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Africa as separate problems, demonstrating what I call babysitter syndrome. You know what is babysitter syndrome? It's when a babysitter just looks only where the loudest cry or shout or noise comes from, immediately turning to a next one. We forget a very important thing. I'm sure many of you know the starting opening words of the UN Charter Preamble. It starts with the word, which are faithful, we, the peoples of the United Nations, determined, and only then all the things, good things that we want to achieve. We, the peoples. Maybe many of you have visited UN in New York, here in Geneva, in other places, meetings. Have you ever seen peoples? I've participated in many meetings, in the General Assembly, in many meetings. I've never seen peoples. I've seen always representatives of the governments in state instead of peoples. And we should realize that in a world of 7.7 billion people, it is no surprise that our global system is more complex than at any time in history. Statesmen and foreign policy experts have long been taught to view the world as a chessboard. Everybody is talking it. Politics is like a chessboard game, analyzing the decisions of powerful states and anticipating the reactions of rival states in an endless game of strategic advantage. The modern chessboard world is structured by the Peace of Westphalia, which established the two major concepts, state sovereignty and the equality of states. It was an enormous accomplishment at the time when it happened. But when did it happen? In 1648. Soon we will be celebrating 400th anniversary of that. And all that time since Peace of Westphalia, the international world order was based on balance of power, on different variations, but still the balance of power. During this game, the participants see states in eternal competition with other states to advance their national interests. That view of the world is inherently neither bad nor good. Depending on the nature of the ruler or government, a country's national interest can be defined as a world domination or the welfare of its citizens, or anything in between. The chessboard remains a highly relevant metaphor for large portions of international relations, but chessboard metaphor is ceased to be the only and one model. Equally relevant, if far less recognized, is the web model. We live in the age of internet. Imagine a visualization of the internet, a mass of interconnected networks with a number of larger and smaller nodes and countless number of these nodes. That is what the web view of the international system looks like, with intersecting networks of people, groups, businesses, institutions, and governments. They call it today which are whatever is not belonging to the state level, they call it the non-state actors. You know, it looks like to call a car a horseless carriage. The term speaks much more to what the actors are not than what they are. And it is much more helpful and productive to see global actors as participants of both nodes and the creators of networks. States are independent so far, entities that choose whether to ally or not to ally with each other or with anybody else. Members of the networks, by contrast, matter only to the extent that they are durably connected to other members, bringing the network into being. And there are three main consequences of this transformation. The first one is inclusive nature. Until recently, until the Cold War, ever since the Peace of Westphalia, whatever was happening in North Atlantic European region was important. Whatever was happening outside that region was marginal. And today, the periphery becomes central because, at least regarding conflictuality, look at the number of conflicts popping up in the world, and all of them are very important today. The second element is deep mutation of the nature of conflict. So far, the nature of conflict was belonged to the competition between powers. Today, we feel more and more often that weakness is replacing power. We talk about the failed state. We talk about the guerrilla wars in these countries, in these states, and so on and so on. So again, from the point of view of the possibility to feed conflictuality, weakness becomes more and more important. The third aspect concerns mobility. Everything becomes mobile today. Our international system used to be fully based on the idea of territory and boundaries, on the idea of fixity established, which established the competences of states in a very precise way. And in this perspective, the state refers to territory, as a definition given by Max Weber states very clearly. They have the territory. But today, this territorial notion of politics is challenged by a full range of mobilities composed of international flows that can be either material, informational, or human. And these are three indicators illustrating a deep, very deep transformation of the inner nature of the international relations. And the notion of interstate, the relationship between the state, cannot capture the entirety of the global game today. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement. It has been spreading across the world like a wildfire. It is not just anti-racist. It is not just national. It is more profound, much more profound. And to a large extent, this was provoked by the existing global governance system inadequacies. A key driving force behind them is a deep awareness of the need of radical change, not reforms to a perfectly engineered system, but the desire to replace the entire mechanism and start anew. Traditional world order seems to be too tight for development of humankind. I see a lot of young faces now here, and it might be my analogy will be more familiar to you, but I'm sure you recently felt that. When a teenager all of a sudden finds his jeans too tight, having simply grown out of his clothing, we need today, we need not only to change the clothing. Instead of international, we need to develop intersocial forms of effective multilateralism to face global changes and opportunities. And it is uncharted territory ahead. We cannot, even forecast what will happen. 2 years ago, we had no idea that the new war will break out in Europe. The war that will destroy, explode the world order that has existed before. Predictably, the first reaction, it's like when you break the cup. The first reaction is to glue the pieces together, but that's a bad mistake with the world, very bad, conceptual mistake. Bad not just in substance, but totally inadequate as dictated by inertia rather than reason. Because it is an attempt to reshuffle the core pieces of the old world order, and these remaining pieces do not fit together anymore. And when I listen today to the current leaders, I think it's a funny situation, really funny. In principle, no one disputes that the Potsdam peace has gone to tatters. It's gone. They say the same thing, that the problem we face is that the old world order has collapsed. Biden says that, and Putin says that, and everyone, and Xi says that, and European politicians say the same. Then the question arises. It has collapsed. We should build a new one. But how to build a new one? What it should be like? Everyone understands it in their own way. As a result, the New World Order that each side promotes and proposes turns out to be like the famous, like in a famous joke, I hope you understand that I come from the Soviet Union. I was born in the Soviet Union. And at the time of perestroika, there was a joke, because during the reprofiling all the military, all the armaments factories to some peaceful activity, it was very difficult to achieve. So the joke, there was a military installation, I mean the production facility, and they all commanded that it should be producing the pram for children, pram, the carriages for children, for babies. And then the chief engineer comes and complains, we've tried everything. We changed everything. We changed assembly line. But when we start assembling, instead of pram, we get the machine gun Kalashnikov. That's what's happening now with the attempts to think about the future. All, whatever they build, I mean, the politicians of today, they come out with the same Potsdam world, but configured for them. That is the problem. Nobody can come up with with new ideas. The webinar is not a proper place to talk about the details of the new system of international relations. But de facto, its outlines are simply or dimly visible. The emerging system resembles today I am not mean the system that should have been created. What we get as a result of this reassemblage. We get the same balance of power system in a new disguise. Instead of two poles, we are getting two concerts playing at the same time, authoritarian and liberal, but still the balance of power. And it will never work. That's why we need to change and develop the, I call it intersocial forms of effective multilateralism to face global challenges and opportunities. We need an updated operating system, if I may say that. Call it effective multilateralism or plurilateralism. That is based not only on the Westphalian sovereign states pattern, but involves also nascent stakeholders of the global international society. The new actors are already entering politics. I will ask you, what is the Facebook? Well, we know that this is the network communications platform, etc. It's not a physical state, but with, as of October 2023, more than 3 billion active users. Its population comes first before China and India. It may not be able to tax or jail its inhabitants, but its executives, programmers, and engineers do exercise a form of governance over people's activities and identities. We cannot forget that. We cannot ignore that. Facebook announced plans to launch a new global coin currency. The project was formerly known as Libra, then it was transformed into Diem. The aim of the new currency is not simply to give Facebook a stake in the troubled but expanding cryptocurrencies market. It is much more. It is much more likely that Diem will be part of what is something referred as a social commerce. We are buying a lot more now on social networks, and that might become a currency that will affect our lives. The Danish government, a couple of years ago, decided to establish a post, a position of an ambassador responsible for relationship not with another foreign state, but with digital corporations. The digital ambassadors of Denmark will be facilitating relationship between Denmark and Apple, Google, Microsoft, etc. Next year after the Danish, the French followed that and also introduced that position. And the gap between the nascent plurilateral world and governance traditionally understood and applied within post-Westphalian concept is widening and feeding disorder and disruptiveness of the political system today. And this gap will not be bridged by any new iterations of the traditional unilateral, bilateral, or even multipolar global world order. And I'm sure that the new world order, of course, it's not a matter of a couple of years or even one decade, or it will take a lot of time to, if it does indeed emerge, it will have little in common with the liberal theories of the last century and with its foreign policy practices. Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. As a historian, I have a rather disappointing impression that this is a very fitting description of how we have dealt with the crisis, inevitably producing two new ones, replacing the one we dealt with at the very end. We are all now deeply interconnected, and the current model of multipolarity with the diverging perspectives of its states as the only poles has become not only obsolete, but it has become also dangerous on many counts. And the precise prescription, in fact, was given almost 100 years ago by President Woodrow Wilson, who said there must be not a balance of power, but a community of power, not organized rivalries, but an organized common peace. And we have been trying to achieve it by reshuffling the states-based governance system over and over again with the same outcome. Maybe it is time to listen to Einstein and try something new. And I am afraid that will be your turn to try. Thank you. I'll stop at that. And if you have any question, I will be happy if I will be able to answer them.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. So I'm going to work right now as a moderator. We don't have a lot of time, and we're really happy to see that we're almost 67 people right now. So I will try to fit as many questions as possible. Please be brief, and you can raise your hand or you can write it in the chat, and I will try to do as many questions as I can. So, and also at the end, of course, you can contact us and we can always provide you with some articles or books. We can ask the professors, as Professor Likhotal, to provide us a small bibliography in case that you want one. So I will start right now. I will open the queue, and I see that the first person is Thomas. So please, Thomas, unmute yourself and tell us your question. Thomas? If not, we can pass to the, okay, if not, we can pass to the next person that raised the hand, that it was Henry. So please, Henry, you can unmute yourself and tell us what is your question.
Okay, good afternoon.
Perfect.
Hello, good afternoon.
Oh.
Yes, please, Henry, tell us.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you, Henry. Go ahead with the question, please.
Okay, I want to appreciate you, Prof, and everyone in house. This is my first time being here in house. I just want to ask if this is on record so that I can have it and go over and over it again and listen to it.
Yes, of course you can. Do you have any questions related to the topic?
I don't think I have much to say about the topic. What I just want to say is that the issue of global security, it's been an issue over the years, and I think it's a very big concern, just like as the professor have said, that what is the problem? And as a new person in-house today, I think I would like to reserve some of my questions till next time when we shall be meeting by God's grace. That is all I can say. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Henry. Please tell us your questions. I see that the next person is Isaiah, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So please, unmute yourself and tell us.
Yeah, correct. You've given the correct pronunciation of my name. Thank you. My name is Isaiah. I'm from Kenya. I'm a student of international diplomacy. And Professor, there is an area I want you to explain more. There is this point of you say that rather than working on international relations, we need to be working on intersocial relations in the quest of combating global challenges. And my concern is that you realize that international relations, we have the aspect of realism, which gives nations the power of sovereignty and everything. And so we have the states as the key actors in international relations. So how do you think intersocial relations are going to be done in international order? Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you very much. You just hit the nerve of the problem with your question, if I may say. Well, in fact, you even do not realize that you are doing that already. When you're on a social network, you are not casting your vote in terms of your preference, likes and dislikes, only once every 4 years when you go to the ballots. So you are indicating your preferences, your political preferences also. Every day, many times, as soon as you connect to the networks, you are doing that. So, in fact, that has already started this process. Then, of course, then there is a big issue about the possibilities of other agents. I'm not speaking about intersocial relationship as the only person to person. I'll give you an example. Recently, we have passed through the COVID. All the world has gone through these epidemics. And of course, at different times, different countries, different nations were luckier or more successful or not that lucky and less successful. Here, and I live in Geneva, that's where the school is, we have the neighboring big city of Lyon in France. During the COVID, there was a period when the numbers of the people which were contaminated, which picked up the virus of COVID, were much higher in France than the ability of France to cope it in the clinics. There was no enough machines, etc., etc. They tried first to reach an agreement between the two countries, Switzerland and France. But the situation was real emergency. And then the authorities of Lyon, knowing very well the leaders of the city of Geneva, applied directly to the city of Geneva. And it happened, they found out that several hospitals in the canton of Geneva were not absolutely filled with the sick with the COVID. So they agreed immediately. And the French restructured their speed trains to carry people sick with COVID with all the necessary equipment. And all these trains, literally, the next day started to arrive to Geneva. This is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that by force the states will be squeezed out of the international relations. They will be simply gradually marginalized by the reality, because it's much easier to cope with various subjects on the matter, on the level between city to city dialogue, community to community dialogue. And it's only a matter how to channel this. Now, of course, we are in the very beginning when Artificial intelligence is being used in order to help us to achieve new ways of interacting between each other. There are lots of pitfalls, lots of problems on that way, but I must say, tell you, those who do not know that, for instance, in a big country, the budgets today are done by artificial intelligence and by via the internet. Today, it's very difficult to understand the budgets. Will it come sometime in the future that the governments will be sitting and waiting when they will be receiving the current budget from the machine, from the artificial intelligence or the machine? It's very difficult to imagine that, but this is coming because there are so many factors that the mind of one human being is not capable to take into account. And these issues, when the new impacts are accumulating more and more, will require absolutely new ways of dealing with them. And that will require new world order, new system of international relations. It's not that will come artificially created by people. It will come out by itself. The question is only, as always, what will be the price? Not in terms of money, but in terms of how many people we will lose before we understand and stop pretending that it is something that we can just forget and not notice. Okay.
Now the next question is Denise. I saw that you are the next one that, so please tell us.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to hear your lecture on global security, and I'm participating in the following weeks on an international competition of NATO. And I would like to know, how do you see, or how do you think that we as the youth sector can battle disinformation regarding global security and human rights? Or what could be done to battle disinformation in this sense?
You know, this question that you have raised requires a separate lecture because it's so huge. Did I understand correctly? You are attending the event in NATO? NATO, you said?
I'm going to participate in an international competition about NATO.
Okay. Well, actually, I think that since its creation, NATO has gone through very painful, I would say, life story. Because at times it was considered to be the only safeguard against the war. At other times, it was considered to be the threat to peace. Then, after the end of the Cold War, there were a lot of discussions about the necessity of continuing existence of NATO. And I remember that many scholars in the United States were saying that NATO has outlived its utility. Now that all of us are almost brothers, we can forget about different military alliances, and maybe we should not spend any money for that. Luckily for the world, it didn't happen, and we saw recently that NATO still plays an important role in peace and security. I dislike the term security, frankly. I've already mentioned why. Because it is perception, and when you talk about perceptions, you cannot talk with hard facts. But peace is something which is very relevant. And today, of course, NATO is an arm of peace. What it will be in the future, whether it will live endlessly, I think that there will be all these units will be going through a very important period in the future, because they will have to acquire, to take on board some things which have been absolutely alien to them. Human rights is one of them. But I think that if it doesn't take it on board, it will not find the raison d'être in the future. After this war, or the next war, or the next war will be over and done with. So I think that many current institutions that exist in the world, including NATO, will be competing in finding new reasons for their existence in the future. Because in about 15 years, you will not recognize the world, because $10 trillion will be invested in the economy during that period of time. You can only imagine what will be the results of the development of the infrastructure, of the networks that exist in the world, all the impacts of the Internet of Things and all the rest of that. So they will have, these organizations and institutions will have to adapt to the new atmosphere if they would want to live in the future. Well, maybe I warned that I will need a full lecture in order to say something more understandable for your question.
Still, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dennis. The next person, we don't have a lot of time, so we will do 2 more questions. The next person is Malik. So please, Malik.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me a chance, and thank you so much, Professor, for your short, precise, but a brief overview. I hope you can hear me. My question is
Yes.
this: thank you. I'm a student of security and human rights in Italy. I'm a master's student from Pakistan, and my question is: you talked about the organized peace instead of unorganized revelries. So, how do past instances of organized peace, such as historical alliances or peace treaties, enhance our comprehension of the strategies and efforts needed to establish enduring global harmony?
Well, Malik, thank you for your question. But I would say peace is not stateless. It's sort of an existential achievement. It's not a treaty, though we can speak about peace treaty or ceasefire treaties or guarantees of peace, etc., etc. But real peace comes only when there will be no incentives to violate this peace. And as long as the world system is built upon only states, there will be attempts to change the balance in one side or the other. Then, for me, the true peace will be achievable only on the basis of the intersocial relations in the future. Before that, we will be talking about security, ceasefires, it's also important. The lesser people are dying in the wars, of course, it's already an achievement. But I'm maybe a dreamer. You know, if I'm thinking about the eternal peace in the future, as many thinkers before me were already writing various treatises. I'm sure as a student of the master level, you have examined many of them.
Thank you very much, Malik. And the last one, the last question that we are going to take today is from Anna. So please, Anna.
Yeah, hi, and thanks for the possibility. I'm Anna, and I'm from Ukraine, but now I'm studying in Austria. And firstly, thanks for your insights. And my question is regarding this new world order you mentioned, and the international relations in this new world in the future. We know that the world is trying to kind of isolate Russia or keep distance from this country by setting sanctions and so on. Do you think that in future this country will be accepted again in the international community after the war is over and hopefully after the Ukraine's victory, or would it not be accepted again back?
Thank you, Anna. I understand, of course, this is a big question for you, because I understand it maybe better than you think, because I'm half Ukrainian, half Russian. My father was Ukrainian, mother Russian, so I don't know who am I today. But, you know, this closing up of Russia, it's an imaginary process. What are you talking about? You know, Russia is so vast. You cannot ignore it. This is the fact of geography. Whether somebody like it or dislike it, but this is a fact of geography, and it will remain on the political arena. The question is different. Of course, there will be a very difficult, even after Russia will cure itself from the current regime, and maybe in a generation from now will be considered as cured itself, there will be difficult relationship between Russia and Ukraine. For me, it's clear, as for you. What has happened cannot be bridged by any agreements, because it's genetic memory which has been created now between the two people of the two countries. And I can tell you that it's a tragedy. It's not even a drama. It's a tragedy for both sides, for both people. But I would say that in terms of the acceptance in the world, it will be resolved rather quickly as soon as Russia departs and says goodbye to the current regime in whatever way it happens, but it will happen. And of course, it will fulfill what is necessary. It must, of course, pay for what it has done in Ukraine, by all means, for me. And the criminals that led the country to that, and by the way, they inflicted this damage not only to Ukraine, they inflicted this damage which will last longer than the damage inflicted to Ukraine. They inflicted that on Russian people as well. Therefore, I think that it will be reincorporated in the world system as soon as in foreseeable period of time. This will be done by the future leaders of Russia. And I hope that in the longer time, we will be able to bridge the gap between Russia and Ukraine. Never say never. You know, I remember my mother, she survived the blockade in Leningrad. She said that I don't want to hear German anymore. I don't want to anything, any mentioning of that. And about 15, 20 years later, she changed her opinion. And the Russian people that suffered from the German occupation, similar as Ukrainians are suffering today from the Russian occupation, in 20 years were ready to forget that. Not to forget, but to forget. Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much again for your time. Thank you very much, Professor, for your lecture. It's always amazing to hear you. And right now we are going to pass to the third part of this webinar, in which I'm going to present you to the General Manager, that is Dr. Rakesh Krishnan, that we will explain you, talk to you a little bit about the institution, the Geneva School of Economics. No, it's completely fine, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you, and hope to see you in Geneva. Bye-bye.
I just want to say thank you very much to our Professor Alexander Likhotal, who is essential part of Geneva School of Diplomacy. My name is Rakesh, and I'm the General Manager here. I'm not going to take a lot of time. I just want to say two, three things. As you know, we are in Geneva, the capital of diplomacy. And one thing I noticed from the chats, as well as from feedback received from Ushia, that many of you are contemplating studying diplomacy or international relations and topics related to international relations further. But this is not a place where we could actually discuss everything regarding that. But what I would suggest to you, since we don't have time, is to write your emails in the chat box if you're interested in pursuing a career in diplomacy, a career in international relations or education, particularly in Geneva. And what as a special facility or a service we could do is that we'll ask our team to get back in touch with you to talk, to give more impersonal opinion on what's the prospects and how GSD could join you, or you could join GSD in actualizing that prospect. We always want to say something, which is when you want to study something, especially abroad, it is very, very important, if you have experience in studying abroad, that you study the right course to get entry into a career that you wish to enter. And you must study that in the most apt place, the right place. Why is that? If you study a course in a place where it's not in demand, at the end of the studying, what's our aim is to get the job and launch a career. It becomes very difficult to launch a career. So whether you're planning for Geneva School of Diplomacy or not, I would strongly suggest you to consider Geneva, because Geneva is the capital of diplomacy, and the opportunities that Geneva provides you and Switzerland provides you in terms of diplomacy is enormous compared to many other capitals in the world, like Washington, New York, Beijing, Moscow. So do take that in mind. We are, as you know, the most exclusive institution in diplomacy and international relations here. So Professor Likhotal is a part of it, and we have several such superstars teaching here. We're actual practitioners. So if this is of interest, please do send in your emails on the chat box, and we will get in touch with you certainly. And one more thing I want to say is that we have several other webinars happening very often like this with experts. As you know, this is for free. So feel free to join us. Feel free to spread the word as well about Geneva School of Diplomacy, about the topics we are discussing, because the topics we are discussing are just not important to us. It's important to a lot of other people in different parts of the world. So please do spread the word. And in case you want to know more about us, please do follow us on social media, and that will give you more information. With that, I don't want to take much time, as I told you. I hope that this session was very helpful.
Sorry that I'm stopping you. It's because I have one person that is wants to answer a question, want to ask a question. That is Malik. So if it's not a problem.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to know that can we get a recorded video of this webinar?
You will receive a recorded video.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I think there's no more further questions. Any questions that you have? I see that some of you have written your email, so we will get back to you on that. I wish that this session was very useful, and the future sessions as well, I'm certain, will be very useful. Have a good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone, wherever you are. We hope to see you soon, either in Geneva or on another webinar or another platform. Have a great day, guys.